Serious neighbors of serial killers / robbers / etc. Did you ever suspect a thing? My girlfriend's, at the time, brother-in-law, got arrested for possession of and distribution of child pornography. I'd known him for approximately 5 years before it happened. He was always an odd guy, but usually very nice and helpful. Some of the oddness was that he was a pack rat. He hated to throw anything away. He kept old boxes and had hundreds of them throughout his place. He started to get weirder, though, in the year before he was arrested. He'd stopped shaving completely and almost never left his place. He was often sickly looking. I was told that he'd developed a short temper as well, although I was never subjected to it personally. He was also fiercely territorial over his computer equipment. I wasn't surprised when I heard that he was raided and in jail for child pornography, but I didn't suspect it at the time. A lot of it clicked afterwards, though. I lived in this great kid-friendly neighborhood and my family lived in the best cul-de-sac. The 6 houses on our little circle had 11 kids. So much fun, especially because in our circle were twins close to my age. They had a stepdad who was super weird. I can't explain what it was exactly, but I never liked him. Even though I was little, he just gave an odd vibe. One day the girls told me they didn't like him, and I agreed with them. They didn't tell me anything specific about why not, just didn't like him, but made it seem very serious, and not just a "we don't like him because he's our stepfather, we don't like him because he's a weirdo." I told them we could run away, logical 7-year-old thinking. We made plans to meet that night. Their mom overheard, and I got in big trouble and was sent home. My parents made me write an apology and tell their stepdad sorry. A few weeks later, the cops show up in a little circle of houses. They knock on our door and ask us to just watch our neighbor's house. I'm not sure why. For the next few hours after they leave. Like, just keep an eye out on it, I think. They left with a stepdad. He had been molesting the girls. Looking back at all the events leading up to it, never wanting to play outside, telling me they didn't like him, the way he just brushed off the apology, like it didn't faze him. He did it oddly, it felt like it all added up. We had a neighbor growing up named M, and he had a daughter named K who my brother's age. He would always ask my brother for help with things and I would tag along. He would try to get K to hang out with my brother, but not with me, and I'm a girl. My brother would have sleepovers there, which is extremely strange considering him and K were of opposite genders and were about 11 to 12 years old. M ended up being arrested for child pornography, and it came out then that he was an avid member of NAMBLA as well. My brother would never say if anything ever happened to him while he was there, but he was super protective of M. That made my parents suspicious as hell, but there was never proof. I was also told by my parents that we had a pedophile as our upstairs neighbor when I was 3 and my brother was 6. One day my brother disappeared and we couldn't find him. My parents went around the neighborhood looking for him. As they were going back in, my brother exited the neighbor's apartment. I was told he had no expression and wasn't reacting to anything. He never said whether anything happened though. He doesn't even remember being taken. The guy was later arrested and charged from a different incident. No one ever suspected anything. M was a pillar in our community and volunteered a lot. Also was the HOA president where we lived. I lived 2 blocks away from Robert Picton. His property was a medium-sized swathe of land opposing the local high school I attended. From outside perspective it was nothing special. I'd walked beside that property every Wednesday for over 4 years and had never seen him once. It came as a shock to everyone in the community when they overturned the entire property with heavy machinery and found the horrendous state of some of the remains within the soil. Here it's still a sensitive topic for most, especially since an elementary school was built over former Picton land before he was convicted. I'm not really sure if this fits, but I live down the street from a guy who ended up murder-suiciding himself and his wife. It happened in Fountain, Colorado maybe 3 years ago. They always seemed like a really friendly couple. They were polite, and when my family was struggling to get food they stopped by and dropped us off a huge basket full of all sorts of canned goods and fruits. They had kids, 2 daughters I think, that would play with my littlest brother outside almost constantly. They were really good friends. I'm not sure what happened to them after the night in question. There was no warning to it, no vibe that gave it away, that one day one of them would snap and just outright kill the other and end themselves. They didn't seem to fight, neither of them ever caused any sort of trouble, and as far as we knew they were pinnacles of what good neighbors are. They lived 3 houses down from us, and in the middle of the night cops showed up the house because one of the daughters had found them and called 911. My co-worker of 2 years murdered his girlfriend. I did not really like him, our personalities clashed, and I thought he was a bit of a dickhead. From what I heard he was taking steroids and mixing them with other drugs. I was not necessarily surprised when I found out. This happened when I lived in Vancouver. When I was very young, someone who lived down the street stabbed 2 of his daughters to death. He had gotten very depressed and planned to kill his whole family, commit suicide, and meet them in heaven. He snapped out of it after killing his 2 daughters, called the police, and sat in his yard until the police arrived and arrested him. I didn't know him or his family, but, as far as I know, no one suspected him, as he acted normal until he was ready to kill his family. He's currently in prison, and is apparently much better now that he's been treated. In fact, his wife has forgiven him and wants to get back together, although I'm not sure his other children forgive him. I went to high school, and one of the teachers was always seen as a cool smart guy. What's interesting is that this particular boarding school has employees go through numerous psychological tests and background checks because they've had issues in the past with adults who exploit children. The boarding school enrolls everyone from newborns to high school seniors. The only thing that ever seemed off about him was that his license plate said his last name with the number 69. Students would joke about it or find it creepy. Fast forward half a year, and I'm watching the local news when I see this guy's mugshot. Apparently he began teaching at a different school and was accused of molesting at least one boy. I later found out that, he was born in 69, but obviously that's not a smart number to put on your plate if you're going to do what he did. My friends and I used to joke about my old apartment neighbor being a child molester. He was super old, creepy, and drove this really big white windowless van. Well, I was at work one day and someone was like, "Did you see where they busted some guy in small town where my aunt was online for sending masturbation videos to undercover cops, pretending to be 15-year-old girls and asking for pictures?" Sure enough, it was my neighbor. My great-great-aunt ran off with a neighbor in the 30s. My grandmother said the man had always scared her, even though she was small at the time, and the great-great-aunt's mother had told her daughter flat out, when she learned about the affair, that she shouldn't trust him, because butter wouldn't melt in his mouth. My grandma said that she thought that meant that, even though the man was funny and charming and always seemed cheerful, apparently a lot of other people thought he was a great guy. It was in sort of a calculated way. She said his smile never seemed to reach his eyes. They ran off together, and a few months later he shot her to death as she was hiding in a closet. I learned about the story because my great-grandmother's family Bible had George shot her as cause for death. I was the dorm building over from a guy who chopped up his parents with an axe. He came back to school like nothing had happened before being arrested. He was in a poker group I frequented, so we met several times. Never really noticed anything out of the ordinary with him. His frat brothers all said he seemed off and was creepy, but they only said that after he killed his folks and the story was getting media attention. This is him, Christopher Porco. When I was a junior in college, a friend of mine was arrested for distribution of child pornography. Apparently he had a whole big collection and was posting it online and sharing it with other internet pedos. I'd known this guy since we were 12. He had a great sense of humor, smart as hell, and just generally friendly and nice. He even had a great relationship with a really pretty and fun girl. Definitely nobody saw it coming. Late to the party, but when I was growing up in suburbia, we lived next to a beekeeper. This was all well and good, except for the fact that he would always try to offer to pack any cuts or broken bones or really any injuries anyone suffered with his bees. Other than that, he was a fairly normal guy. Then he killed his wife and himself after eating his cat.